Such data is found in writings among ones and the others. Ruling dynasty in Babylon was overthrown and one new dynasty, one from the maritime people, took power. The king of Hattush withdrew without trying to retain power in Babylonia. He kept only Damascus in his power. This is the time of Hyksos in Egypt. Gerstang's time of those events is more than half a century late. There is not much to pay attention to because, as far as the date is concerned, various assumptions have been made. Everything else is true. The Hattusians followed Nino's campaign to Mesopotamia, and after capturing it they returned and further east. Other nations were led in this place as auxiliary warriors, primarily Arabs who went as Nino's allies. As for the mention of the dynasty from the maritime people, it is essentially true in terms of origin, but Gerstang used the name here which appears much later, at the time when Serbian tribes invaded Egypt and the Middle East, coming across the sea and relying on Crete as its stronghold. Among these tribes of the maritime people, the main role was played by the Serbs, Serdani, from Egyptian records. The people of Varduna know that the attack on Mesopotamia came from the land of Hattushka, and that is how they wrote it, and it can be believed that they did not find out where the campaign started for a long time. George Barton cites a Varduna record that says that people from the land of Hattu opposed Shamsuditan. Shamsuditan was the last ruler of Vardun country from the native dynasty. Regarding the Hyksos, the same writer says, "The Hyksos are Hittites who conquered Egypt, and the arrival of the Semites in Egypt coincides with the arrival of Hyksos, and it is probable that they came there under the leadership of the Hyksos." During the conquest of Egypt in Nino's time, numerous Hattush Hurrites were present with Serbs, but the Egyptians did not differentiate between the leaders and their assistants and called them all Hyksos. The Hurrians were part of garrison army in Egypt, and Jews were present alongside them in the same business. According to Albright, the Jews were settled in Egypt around the capital of Hyksos, Tanis, a koan from the Jewish Psalms. There were many Semites in position near Hyksos. Only the ruling class of Hyksos were the Aryans, the Geti. Hence the rather obscure stories about the Hittites in the Middle East and when the Jews followed them. The same is true for the Hattusians, Hittites, who had the ruling class Aryans and the people of other races and languages. This was the case in most other countries conquered by Aryans in the East. One commander of Pharaoh Amenemhet I, who ruled from 2000 to 1970 BC, tells Pharaoh that he destroyed a Hittite castle near the Egyptian border in Palestine. Zuke associates write, "The first Indo-European attack was on Babylon, where the Hittites fell like a storm. The first Asian population, non-Aryan, is known as Hatti. In their neighborhood was Indo-Europeans who conquered Hatti and made one empire, which we call Hittite or Indo-European, and real Hatti, Proto-Hittites." Piran says that the Iron Age began in 2100 BC. Since the first iron was processed in Asia Minor, the possession of iron weapons can explain this Aryan collapse in Mesopotamia like a storm. René Dussault describes three Hattush periods. The first is one that marks the old population of the non-Aryan language and which is mentioned as Hatti. The second period is the time of the second millennium when the Aryans took power and introduced their own language, at least as far as state administration is concerned. Then the Great Hattush Empire was created, which we divide into Old Empire from around 1800 to 1650 BC, and the New Empire from 1450 to 1200 BC. The third period is a time after the collapse of Hattush Empire, when the Neo-Hattush Empire existed in northern Syria, lasting for about 5 centuries, preserving the Hattush Enlightenment and pictorial script. Regarding the Hattushians, René Groos says, the Hattush, it is known, were a mixed people who settled on a plateau of Asia Minor in Cappadocia with Asian people, the natives of Naples, Anatolia, over whom they fled around 2000 BC, conquering Indo-European nobility. These were the Hattush king from the 15th century BC, according to records found in capital Hattusha, which is the Pteria of Greek geographers and modern Boghaz-K, and they introduced future Armenia into great history. Jacques Pirenne believes that the destruction of the first Troy was just when the Hittites invaded in Asia Minor. Ramses says, I assume that the Hattids or Hittites were not originally an Anatolian population, but a conquering tribe that came from the northeast or the Helm Peninsula. In my opinion, if I dare say, they probably came from the other direction. In this regard, Albright says, around 1800 BC, Western Asia Minor was inhabited primarily by a people who called themselves Hattu, who called themselves Proto-Hittites to distinguish them from another Hittite people who came later and spoke an Indo-European language and were called Nasi or Neshi. These Nesiti settled in Cappadocia around 2000 BC, another Indo-European people, whom the Hatti called Luvi, inhabited the whole of southern Asia Minor, and their language was related to Nesiti. In the 18th century BC, one Luwite dynasty ruled in Kerkemesh on Euphrates. When it comes to Hattushians, that is, the Hattis, it is necessary to explain who the Nisaeans were, that is, the Nessites, as Western writers call them. The Huri or Hurrites, the Mitanns, and the Amorites, who were all closely related to the Hatts. The Duch were a tribe of Serbian race. In fact, the Nisaeans were one tribe of Serbian race. In fact, the most eastern part of Serbian tribes in Asia Minor before Nino's campaign. They raised the city of Nisa in neighborhood and southern of Hattushians on the left coast of Halis, almost in a straight line from Hattusha towards the south. It looked like that Hattush, Nisa, and Mazaka made the corners of one isosceles triangle. During the Nino's campaign, it was the Nisaeans who occupied Hattusha, the capital of the Hurrites. Somewhat later, they moved their capital from Nisa to Hattush, and after Nisa they called the Nesiti, or Nesiti. The Hurrites had another kingdom east of Hattusha, but it also fell under the rule of Aryans, who are called Mitanns here. The name reminds us very much of the Serbian Mita dynasty in Phrygia and the Mita kings in Macedonia. Regarding the Hurrites, René Dussault says, the Hurrites were located east of Hattusha in the north, Mesopotamia, from where they spread to the southern under the name of Mitana, all the way to the Tigris and Kerkemesh rivers and to the place Nuzi near the mountain Zagros. In the middle of the second millennium, the Mitanns extended their rule to the northern Syria. Hurims or Hurrites are called an Asian people who were the same as the natives in the state of Hattush. The ruling class was made up of Aryans named Mitanni. The Mitann Empire was a faithful image of Hattusha. We know for sure that the whole mythology was Aryan, and even with the same names of gods as the Aryans in Media and India in relation to Hurrites, Messerschmitt says. Egyptian and Assyrian records from 1500 to 700 BC, they talk about enmities with tribes in northern Syria, Mesopotamia, Cilicia, Cappadocia, and Armenia.